97% don't survive spiritual awakening, not because they're weak, because they fight the one thing that has to die, who they think they are. I'm going to show you how to let it go without losing yourself. If your life suddenly feels fake, your identity feels like a costume you can't take off, and everyone around you seems asleep, you're not broken. You're right on schedule. This is the dissolution, and what you do in the next few months will determine whether you emerge whole or spend years lost in the void. Let me sit with you and explain what's really happening, why most people abort this process, and exactly how you become part of the 3% who make it through. There comes a moment in certain lives when the carefully constructed walls of identity begin to crack. It rarely announces itself with trumpets. More often, it arrives as a whisper of discontent that grows into a roar you can no longer ignore. Perhaps it began with a loss, a death, a divorce, a diagnosis that everything changed. Perhaps it was success. You climbed to the top of your mountain, only to discover the view was empty. Or perhaps it came unbidden, a spontaneous opening that left you seeing through the veil of ordinary existence into something vast and terrifying and beautiful all at once. This is what the mystics have called the dark night of the soul. But that poetic name barely touches the raw reality of what you're experiencing. You are being unmade, and every cell in your body is screaming in protest because everything in nature resists dissolution. The caterpillar does not willingly become soup in the cocoon. The seed does not eagerly split open in the dark soil. And you do not want to let go of who you thought you were. This is why most never survive, not because the journey destroys them, but because they fight so hard to remain what they were that they exhaust themselves in resistance. Let me be clear about what's happening. Your ego, that collection of memories, stories, beliefs, and identities you've called me for all these years, is dying. And it should, it must, because it was never really you to begin with. But here's the beautiful and terrible truth. You cannot kill the ego. You cannot fight your way through this. The very act of fighting strengthens what you're trying to transcend. It's like trying to smooth water by hitting it. You only create more turbulence. One of the most painful aspects of this journey is the loneliness. And I want to acknowledge this directly, because I know many of you are experiencing an isolation so profound it feels like you're living on a different planet from everyone else. You try to explain what's happening to your family, your friends, your partner, and their eyes glaze over. Or worse, they worry about you. They suggest therapy, medication, a vacation. They want you to get back to normal. And you cannot find the words to tell them that normal is exactly what's dissolving, that you cannot go back because there's nothing left to go back to. You're not crazy. You're not broken. You're between worlds, no longer who you were, not yet who you're becoming. The Tibetans call this the Bardo state. The Christians might call it the desert, the dark night, the void. And yes, it's lonely, because most people are still asleep, still comfortable in their constructed realities, still able to find meaning in the games and roles and stories that you can no longer believe in. But here's what I need you to understand. This loneliness, as painful as it is not a punishment. It's a purification. It's burning away your need for external validation, your addiction to being understood, your dependence on others to confirm your reality. You are learning to stand in truth, even when you stand alone. This is not easy, but it is necessary, and you are not as alone as you think. Across time and geography, thousands are walking this same pathless path. They may not be in your immediate circle, but they exist. Some of you are reading these words right now, and in this moment, you're together in understanding. Let me speak plainly about what terrifies most people on this journey: the loss of self. You had a career. It defined you, gave you purpose, structured your days. Now it feels meaningless, an elaborate game you no longer care to play. You had a personality. The funny one, the responsible one, the smart one, the spiritual one. Now you're not sure who you are when you're not performing these roles. You had beliefs, religious, political, philosophical frameworks that explained reality. Now they feel like children's stories you've outgrown. You had relationships, and now you're discovering some were built on mutual illusion rather than genuine seeing. The foundation is crumbling. This is the ego death that spiritual teachings speak of so casually, as if it's a pleasant afternoon activity. Let me tell you, it's not. It feels like you're dying, because part of you is. I've watched people in this phase try desperately to grab onto something, anything, to feel like themselves again. They throw themselves into new spiritual practices, new identities. I'm awakening. I'm a light worker. I'm ascending. This is just the ego trying to survive by wearing spiritual clothing. Others fall into depression, paralyzed by meaninglessness. If nothing matters, why do anything? If the self is an illusion, why get out of bed? Both of these responses are understandable. Both are traps. The truth is more subtle. The self is both real and unreal, both important and ultimately transparent. You are not nothing. You are no thing. There's a profound difference. What's dying is not your essential being. What's dying is your attachment to a fixed, solid, permanent identity. What's dying is the story of who you thought you had to be. And yes, this death is real. Honor it. Grieve it. Don't skip over this part. You cannot bypass the darkness by pretending to be enlightened. The only way out is through. Now let me tell you precisely why 97% never complete this journey. There are specific traps, specific failures that cause most to abort the process or become stuck indefinitely. When the dissolution becomes unbearable, most people desperately seek someone or something to save them. A guru, a teaching, a practice, a substance, a relationship. They want someone to tell them exactly what to do, to give them a map, to guarantee they'll be okay. But awakening is not about finding the right teacher. It's about becoming your own authority. No one can walk this path for you. No one can give you second-hand enlightenment. Yes, guidance can be valuable, but if you're waiting for someone to rescue you from the void, you'll wait forever. The void is the doorway. You must enter it alone. This is perhaps the most insidious trap. You learn the language of awakening, presence, non-attachment, oneness, and you use these concepts to avoid feeling your pain. It's all an illusion, so my suffering doesn't matter. I'm not my story, so I don't need to deal with my trauma. Everything is perfect as it is, so I'll just accept my dysfunction. This is not awakening. This is avoidance wearing a spiritual mask. True awakening includes everything, the light and the shadow, the transcendent and the mundane, the peace and the pain. You cannot skip over your humanity in your rush to become divine. Integration means bringing consciousness to every level of your being, including the wounded parts you'd rather transcend. The spiritual journey is not linear, and it's easy to lose your way. You have glimpses of profound clarity followed by months of confusion. You experience divine peace followed by weeks of anxiety. You feel connected to all things one day and utterly alone the next. This is normal. This is the spiral path. But many interpret this fluctuation as failure. I thought I was awakening, but I'm back to suffering, so I must have been deluding myself. No, you're cycling through different layers of purification. Each time you return to darkness, you're going deeper. Each time you return to light, you're integrating more. The key is to keep going, to not abandon the journey when it gets confusing or contradictory, to trust the process even when you can't see the destination. Some people become so enamored with the transcendent that they reject the ordinary. They quit their jobs, abandon their responsibilities, float off into spiritual la-la land where everything is energy and vibration, and the material world is Maya, illusion to be escaped. But here's the paradox. True awakening brings you more fully into life, not out of it. The goal is not to transcend the human experience, but to fully inhabit it from a place of consciousness. You still have a body. You still have bills. You still have relationships. You still have to brush your teeth and wash dishes and show up for your life. The awakened life is not about escaping these things. It's about doing them without suffering, without resistance, without losing yourself in identification. Many people have an awakening experience, a moment of profound clarity, oneness, peace, and they think, I've arrived, I'm enlightened now. Then reality comes crashing back in, and they're devastated. They spend years trying to recapture that one experience, that one state, as if awakening is a permanent high you achieve and maintain. But awakening is not a state. It's not a feeling. It's not an experience that happens to you and then you're done. Awakening is an ongoing process of seeing through illusion, of releasing identification, of deepening into what's real. It's not a destination you reach. It's a way of being you grow into, layer by layer, moment by moment, sometimes over many years. The initial awakening is just the beginning. The real work is integration, bringing that consciousness into every corner of your life, every shadow you've hidden, every wound you've avoided, every relationship, every mundane task. This is why most don't survive. They want the transcendent moment without the years of patient integration that follow. Now, let me offer you what so many spiritual teachings fail to provide: practical guidance for navigating this territory. Because truth without application is just philosophy, and you need more than concepts right now. You need a way to actually live through this. When everything is dissolving, you need something to return to, not as a crutch, but as a rhythm. Create a simple daily practice that grounds you in your body and the present moment. This might be meditation, but it doesn't have to be. It could be walking in nature. It could be conscious breathing for 10 minutes. It could be journaling. It could be sitting with a cup of tea in silence, watching the steam rise. The specifics matter less than the consistency. You're not trying to achieve anything with this practice. You're creating an anchor point, a touchstone of stability in the chaos. You're teaching your nervous system, but amidst all the dissolution, there are still rhythms you can trust. Spiritual awakening can feel so mental, so energetic, so abstract that it's easy to forget you have a body. Don't make this mistake. Your body is processing enormous amounts of energy and change. It needs support. It needs rest. It needs nourishment. It needs movement. When you're in the depths of existential crisis, basic self-care can feel impossible or pointless. Do it anyway. Eat real food. Sleep when you're tired. Move your body every day, even if it's just a short walk. Let yourself cry when tears come. Let yourself rest when you're exhausted. This is not superficial. Your consciousness exists in a body, and that body is the vessel through which awakening must be embodied. Treat it with respect. You cannot do this completely alone. Human beings are relational creatures, and isolation for extended periods will destabilize you further. Yes, the journey is ultimately individual. Yes, no one can walk your path for you. But that doesn't mean you must walk it in complete solitude. Seek out others who understand, whether through spiritual communities, online forums, support groups, or friendships that can hold this level of conversation. You don't need many. Even one person who truly sees you can make the difference between endurance and collapse. And be discerning. Not every spiritual community is healthy. Some are cults in disguise. Some are echo chambers of delusion. Look for people who embody groundedness along with their transcendence. Look for humility. Look for those who can laugh at themselves, who can admit they don't have all the answers, who treat others with genuine kindness. This may sound counterintuitive when your whole life is dissolving, but structure is actually protective during spiritual emergence. Not rigid structure that imprisons you, but flexible container that holds you. Keep some routines, maintain some commitments, have some projects or creative outlets. Even if these feel meaningless in the cosmic sense, they provide continuity for the parts of you that are not yet integrated. You can be having profound mystical insights and still need to pay your rent. You can be experiencing ego death and still need to show up for work or care for your children. This is the paradox of embodied awakening. The goal is not to abandon ordinary life. It's to infuse ordinary life with consciousness. So maintain your connection to the practical world even as you're exploring the transcendent. Here's what most people don't want to hear. Awakening will bring up every unresolved wound, every suppressed emotion, every disowned part of yourself. This is not a malfunction. This is the process. Everything that's been hidden in darkness must come to light to be integrated. This means you'll likely face your deepest fears, your oldest traumas, your most shameful secrets. You'll encounter rage you didn't know you carried, grief you've been avoiding for decades, terror you've been running from your whole life. Don't try to transcend this material. Feel it, face it, find support to process it, whether through therapy, bodywork, journaling, or trusted friends. The spiritual bypassing trap tells you that awakened people are beyond all this messy human stuff. That's a lie. True awakening includes all of you, the enlightened parts and the broken parts, the light and the shadow. Integration means making room for all of it without identifying with any of it. Perhaps the most important practice, learning to be comfortable not having answers, not knowing who you are, not knowing what's real, not knowing what comes next. The mind desperately wants certainty. It wants to figure this out, to understand it, to create a new framework to replace the old one. Resist this urge. There is a profound intelligence in not knowing, in resting in the question rather than grasping for answers. This is the mind learning to be humble, learning to surrender its tyranny of control. When you catch yourself trying to figure it all out, trying to make sense of what's happening, trying to create a new story, pause, take a breath, say to yourself, I don't know, and that's okay. This simple practice, repeated again and again, gradually releases you from the prison of needing to know, needing to understand, needing to have it all figured out. And now, my friend, let me tell you about the 3%. Let me tell you about those who make it through. They are not superhuman. They are not more talented or more intelligent or more spiritual than anyone else. They simply learn to stop fighting the process. They learn to die before they die, so they could truly live. What does it actually mean to not survive the spiritual awakening? It means the person you were doesn't make it through. The ego structure, the false self, the conditioned identity, these don't survive, and that's exactly the point. But you, the essence of you, the awareness that's witnessing all of this, the consciousness that's reading these words right now, you not only survive, you discover you were never in danger to begin with. You discover you are what cannot be destroyed because you are not a thing to be destroyed. Here's what happens when you stop resisting. The anxiety that felt unbearable gradually reveals itself as expansion. What you thought was falling apart was actually opening up. The emptiness that terrified you becomes fullness. The void you feared is actually pregnant with possibility. The loss of identity becomes freedom. When you're no longer trapped in the story of who you thought you had to be, you discover you can be anyone, everyone, no one. You become fluid, responsive, authentic. The loneliness transforms into solitude, and solitude reveals itself as connection to everything. You're not separate from life. You are life experiencing itself through this particular form. The meaninglessness blooms into meaning everywhere. When nothing is inherently meaningful, you're free to create meaning. Every moment becomes sacred, not because it's special, but because it's real. This is what lives on the other side of the dissolution. Not some permanent bliss state where you float through life untouched by pain, but something more valuable: equanimity, presence, the capacity to meet life as it is without needing it to be different. You still feel emotions, perhaps even more deeply than before, but you're not controlled by them. You still have preferences and desires, but you're not imprisoned by them. You still play roles and have a personality, but you know you are not these things. You become like water, flowing into whatever container life presents, taking its shape, serving its purpose, but never forgetting your essential nature. Let me paint you a picture of what everyday awakening actually looks like, because the spiritual marketplace has sold you fantasies that are unhelpful. The awakened life is not mystical transcendence 24 hours a day. It's not constant bliss or permanent peace. It's not floating above the messiness of human existence. It's ordinary. Beautifully, perfectly ordinary. You wake up in the morning. You feel your body. You notice the light coming through the window. You make coffee or tea with attention. You feel gratitude for this simple thing: a warm cup, a new day, breath in your lungs. You go about your day, working, relating, creating, playing. But there's a quality of presence to it now. You're here for it. Not lost in thoughts about the past or worries about the future. Not performing for some imagined audience. Just here, doing what's in front of you. You still get frustrated. You still feel sadness. You still experience fear. But these emotions move through you like weather. They come, they go, and you remain. You don't believe the stories they tell about you. You don't identify with them as who you are. You relate to others with more authenticity because you're no longer protecting a false self. You can afford to be vulnerable because you know your essential being cannot be damaged. You can afford to be honest because you're not trying to maintain an image. You laugh more easily because you see the cosmic joke, the absurdity of existence, the playfulness of it all. You cry more easily too, because your heart is no longer protected by layers of defense. You feel life fully. You find joy in simple things: a conversation, a sunset, a good meal, a moment of connection. Not because you're forcing yourself to be grateful, but because you're actually present enough to receive the gifts that are always here. You contribute to the world not from obligation or ego, but from natural overflow. When you're no longer focused on getting something for yourself, approval, success, security, your energy naturally flows towards service, creativity, love. This is the awakened life. Not perfect, not superhuman, just deeply, profoundly human in the truest sense. So here you are, in the midst of your dissolution, afraid you won't make it, afraid of losing yourself, afraid of the void. Let me tell you something with absolute certainty. You are going to be okay. Not because I can promise you won't suffer. You will. Not because I can guarantee it won't be hard. It will be. but because the you that you're afraid of losing was never real to begin with. You are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are not your identity or your story or your roles or your accomplishments. You are the awareness in which all of these things appear and disappear. And that awareness, that consciousness, cannot be harmed, cannot be lost, cannot die. It was here before your personality formed, and it will be here after this particular expression dissolves. You are that. You have always been that. The spiritual awakening is simply the process of recognizing what's always been true. You are waking up from the dream of separation, the illusion of being a small, vulnerable, isolated self in a threatening world. You are discovering that you are not in the universe. You are the universe, experiencing itself through this particular lens. Does this mean your human struggles don't matter? No. It means they matter differently. They're not problems to be solved so much as experiences to be fully lived, lessons to be learned, growth to be embodied. So stop fighting the dissolution. Stop trying to preserve what's falling away. Stop resisting the death of who you were. Instead, be curious, be present, be willing to not know, be willing to be wrong, be willing to fall apart so you can be reassembled in a truer configuration. Find your daily practices, honor your body, seek your people, feel your feelings, do your inner work, rest in uncertainty, keep going, and remember, the 3% who survive don't do so because they're special. They survive because they stopped trying to survive. They stopped clinging. They stopped resisting. They surrendered to the process, even when it felt like annihilation. And on the other side of that surrender, they discovered something extraordinary. They had never been in danger. The wave had never been separate from the ocean. The dissolution had been an awakening all along. You are that wave, and you are that ocean. And the journey you're on is the process of remembering both truths at once. So take a breath. Feel yourself here, now, alive, aware. Know that countless others have walked this path before you. Know that countless others are walking it with you right now. Know that you carry within you everything you need to complete this journey. The dark night will end. The dawn will come. And when it does, you'll discover that who you truly are was never in darkness at all. You were always the light by which the darkness was known. Welcome home, dear friend. Welcome home to yourself. Now I want you to do something important. The isolation you've been feeling, the sense that no one understands what you're going through, ends right here, right now, in this comment section. Scroll down and tell us where you are on this journey. Don't overthink it. Just write one word that captures your current experience. Dissolution, loneliness, searching, surrender, integrating, awakening, rebirth, scared, confused, hopeful, lost, found. Whatever is true for you in this moment, your single word might be exactly what someone else needs to see today. It might be the confirmation they're looking for that they're not alone, that their experience is valid, that others are walking this same mysterious path. And here's what I want you to do next. Read through the other comments. Find someone whose word resonates with yours. Reply to them. Share a sentence of encouragement. Tell them you see them. Tell them you understand. Offer an insight from your own journey if you have one. This is how we break the isolation that the data showed was one of the biggest struggles for those going through awakening. We create connection. We build community. We hold space for each other's dissolution and rebirth. If someone's comment touches you, tell them. If their words give you hope, let them know. If you see someone struggling in a way you've struggled, reach out. This comment section can become a sanctuary, a place where people in the midst of the dark night can find others who carry lanterns. And if you found value in this message, If it gave you clarity or comfort or practical guidance you needed, do two things. First, hit that like button. It seems like a small thing, but it tells YouTube to share this message with others who are searching for exactly this wisdom. Someone right now is typing "spiritual awakening feels like dying" or "dark night of the soul help" into their search bar. Your like helps this video reach them. Second, subscribe to the Ancient Cipher and turn on notifications. We're building something here, a collection of wisdom for those walking the pathless path. Every week, we explore the territories that most spiritual teachers avoid: the shadow work, the practical integration, the real challenges of embodied awakening. Not just the transcended philosophy, but the actual map for the journey. We talk about the things you're experiencing but can't explain to your family. We address the fears you have at 3 in the morning. We provide the practical guidance that most teachings skip over in their rush to the Enlightenment highlights. This is not just another spiritual channel. This is a resource for those of us who are actually living through the transformation, not just philosophizing about it. And the more of us who gather here, the stronger this community becomes. Share this video with someone you know who's struggling. Maybe they can't articulate what's happening to them yet. Maybe they feel crazy or broken. Maybe they're terrified they're losing their mind. Send them this link. Tell them, "This helped me understand what I'm going through." Maybe it will help you too. You don't have to explain. You don't have to convince them. Just share the resource and let it speak to them if they're ready to hear it. And finally, tell us in the comments, what specific topic do you need us to address next? What part of the awakening process are you struggling with right now? What question keeps you up at night? What fear is the hardest to face? What trap do you keep falling into? Your questions guide our content. Your struggles inform what we create next. This channel exists to serve those walking this path, so tell us what you need. We read every comment. We listen to what you're experiencing, and we create content based on the real challenges you're facing. Remember, you found this video for a reason. This message landed in your awareness at exactly the moment you needed to hear it. That's not a coincidence. That's synchronicity. That's the universe confirming you're on the right path, even when it feels like you're lost. So drop your word below. Connect with your fellow travelers. Like this video to help it reach others. Subscribe to stay connected to this community. Share it with someone who needs it. And tell us what you need to hear next. You're not alone. You're not crazy. You're not broken. You're awakening. And we're here, walking this path together. See you in the comments. And I'll see you in the next transmission.